bet she's AI generated. Did you see this actress, this AI generated actress?
No. Is it based on a real person?
Not to my knowledge. She's totally AI. She's gorgeous. I think.
Well, it wouldn't make sense to just do one that.
Right, but the company that did this AI thing did a whole scene, talking about it, what they were doing, and all AI, not a human in it.
I like to listen to audiobooks to fall asleep, like when I fall asleep. So on YouTube, they have thousands of audiobooks, not the most recent popular ones, but they have thousands of them. So I came across this one site that it just has one after another of ones that are clearly being done now. But there's Sherlock Holmes, Agatha Christie, all those kind of people. I mean, those stories.
Yeah.
And there's so many of them. I started to wonder if they're being generated by AI. In other words, that the story's being written by AI, and that the voice, the reader, is AI.
I think the voices that I hear that are AI are very distinguishable as AI.
Right.
They don't sound.
Although I have heard there's
except for this one thing that they did with this all AI.
Right. And I heard they did there's this one thing, it's done by Google, where you can feed text into it.
Yeah.
And then suddenly there's a podcast with a man and a woman talking about the text that you put in.
I saw something about that.
That one sounds like people. It sounds a lot. It doesn't sound robotic. I mean, maybe if you listened really, really carefully, you could tell. But yeah, so I'm wondering, because they're like an hour and a half, these things, and he's reading it, but because there just seems to be so many of them that I'm just wondering if AI is just generating the story themselves. The thing is, when I listen to the story, they're well done. The drama is not necessarily that exciting, but the storytelling is well done. No, I'm falling asleep. I didn't care at all. Yeah. Good evening. Hello, Lois. Hello, Arona. Hello, Mo.
Hello, Rabbi.
Hello, Rabbi.
Hello,
Excellent.
people.
Rabbi, there's a site called Hitch Resurrected. It's Christopher Hitchens it's all AI, and it's doing his critique of Trump and his critique of Charlie Kirk, and it's unbelievable.
So they fed a certain amount of his of stuff with him on it, so that it could learn him.
Right.
And then it's just applying his.
And
I
some
heard
of
that,
it was him, and then they generate other things that he would say. Right.
There's a guy who, I forgot where I read about this, but there's a guy who was doing it with Rabbi Jonathan Sacks. He put in everything that's in print and all the videos he could find. I don't think he has publicly made available new material, but
yeah.
All right. I am grateful to be sharing this evening together with you as we are preparing for Yom Kippur. Ram Dass, who was originally Richard Alpert, a professor of psychology at Harvard University, at some point became a noted guru. At first, he was noted because he, together with Timothy Leary and others at Harvard, experimented with LSD. And so he was a kind of counterculture guru, but then he became like a guru. He went off to India, found himself a guru, and then his guru finally sent him back to America to do his own thing. Right. So there are thousands and thousands of lectures that are recorded from Ram Dass. I happen to like listening to them. First of all, he's very Jewish. I find that when I listen to people or read people, I tend to like to listen and read people that are Jewish, even if they're not talking about Judaism or even aren't knowledgeable of Judaism or whatever. Just there's something about the cultural expression and communication that I'm attracted to. Anyways, I like very much listening to his stuff. So he one time gave a lecture at a place called the University of Judaism in Los Angeles. I don't know if this place still exists. I think it was at some point associated with the conservative movement. And it was meant to be a lecture from him to the Jewish community. He had been invited on several occasions for people there were a lot of people that just wanted to see if he would look at Judaism and take it seriously. And apparently he did at some point. And so he gave this, it's actually a very fascinating talk that he gave. And there were just Jews of all stripes that came to hear it. So one of the things he pointed out is that with Judaism, there's an expectation that every individual live a lifestyle that the monks of other faiths would live. So, people are surprised by how many rules there are to live a Jewish life. But if you were a Buddhist monk, or if you were a Christian monk, or a Hindu monk, you have lots and lots of rules. There's lots of etiquette and lots of rules. And he was just pointing out that this is one of the unique things about Judaism, that the Judaism expects every individual to live the kind of lifestyle that a completely devoted monk would live in any other faith. And one of the places where you see this, you see this in the fact that we have 613 mitzvahs and we have kashrus and we have Shabbos, but this period of time, from the beginning of Elul through the end of Sukkot, is like a period of time where you are extra devoted to a spiritual discipline. And so, like, there's a guy named Cooper, I think his name is Abraham Cooper, who is a Jewish guy who had been connected to Buddhism and Sufi. He was into a lot of different mystical things. And at some point, he made the choice to become Orthodox, and he and his wife moved to the Old City in Israel. And he even said this at the end, he said, if you're a Sufi, you could have like a 40-day mystical devotion where you're like in a cave somewhere, you're alone, you're just doing meditations and chanting and all these kinds of things, and you could do it for several weeks. I read also about this Zen. This happened in more than one Zen monastery where they had a couple weeks of 10 hours a day meditation. And it would happen every year. And it was one of these things where by the time they were finished, they were both wiped out and also energized at the same time.
Wander away.
Right. I mean, these people have been working on meditating, but this is taking it to an nth degree. So this guy, Abraham Cooper, said that when he experienced Elul to the end of Sukkot, it was more intense than anything he had done anywhere else. Even these places where they're doing stuff, they're devoted all day to doing stuff. It wasn't like this. His experience wasn't like that. Now, obviously, he's taking advantage of everything that's available to do. You know, there's getting up at midnight to say Tikkun Chatzos, and there's davening at sunrise, and there's learning a certain amount and davening a certain amount and all that kind of stuff. But then you add to it the special focus of Elul in preparation for Rosh Hashanah. Then you have Rosh Hashanah. Then you have these days from Rosh Hashanah to Yom Kippur. And then within a couple days, you have Sukkot, and they're still all part of this project. Because even though Sukkot is part of the pilgrimage festivals, it's also part of a 3-holiday progression: Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and Sukkot. So, and it's part of what we call the period of tshuva, of return. The time up to Yom Kippur is characterized as tshuva out of awe, and then Sukkot becomes tshuva out of love, but it's still, part of a progression. You're started at the beginning of Elul, and you're just moving step by step by step by step, and you're moving up. From the beginning of Elul to Yom Kippur is 40 days, and that's already 6 weeks of this kind of work, and then you get that other added week to it. So it's very, very intense. We know that because we're the ones who experience it. But you could imagine that if you took advantage of all what is spiritually available in this time, your day would be completely filled with just making the most out of each day in preparation for this time, and then living the time. In Hasidus, they speak of the king being in the field during Elul, so that he's closer. So you're taking advantage of this closeness. I mean, you just feel he's not really closer, but you feel closer. So in this time, Yom Kippur is probably the most intense, even though, there's things like Hoshana Rabbah, which are pretty intense during Sukkot, but Yom Kippur, I think everybody would agree, is the most intense. So you've got all this going on for about 7 weeks, but there's one day where it's the most of the most of the most that is happening during that one day. And we're told that the work that we're doing is related to tshuva, that for most people, unless you're completely righteous or completely wicked, for most people, the time between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, you still could go either way. And Yom Kippur, the end of Yom Kippur, is where it's getting finalized. And then you see in Hasidic sources, it actually not even the end of Yom Kippur. It's like Hoshana Rabbah. Yeah, but I think most people would agree that that day is the most intense day. And so if you're doing this kind of work, if you said to somebody, you didn't tell them what we do, you just explain the general thing, that there's been a lot of work done already. 40 days of work has been done. And then we're hitting this day, and this is going to be the most intense. And it's about like a return to a degree of purity in our relationship with God. That's what we're looking for. What's called atonement, a kind of cleansing. And that the goal would be that we're completely done with whatever baggage we were carrying from last year or the years before. We're completely done with it, and we are moving forward with just potential and opportunity, and without anything holding us down, any anchors holding us down. So that would be, let's say that's the goal. You tell that to a person, and then you ask them, so what do you think it looks like a day like that? You're just asking, let's say, an American who does no idea what Yom Kippur you do on Yom Kippur, and they hear you and they're listening to the whole thing. I think a lot of them would assume that there's periods of silence, like a lot of silence and alone time. A lot of silence and alone time.
Yeah, because you're reflecting.
Right. If you're, there's some people who might think journaling is involved, like, because you're working on an inventory. Now you've been working on this personal inventory for a while, but Yom Kippur is where you're really hitting it hard. So I think they would assume that there's a lot of silence, a lot of alone time, maybe some journaling, and then they see what we do. I think they would be shocked because there's not one silent moment and there's not one alone moment. You are always with people. I mean, unless you live alone. If you live alone, then when you went home, then you aren't alone. But even that doesn't have to be by design. If somebody, because you're not going off into some ashram during this, you go home.
Right.
You sleep at home, and then you go to shul. In shul, there's never a quiet moment. Never. There's never a quiet moment. If you're not talking, the chazan's talking. If you and the chazan aren't talking, the rabbi's talking, or the guy who's reading the Torah is talking, or there's never quiet. This is one of the sort of funny things about the Jewish people, that we're always, there's always somebody talking. And even on Yom Kippur, there's never a moment we're not talking. So that was just, it's a funny thing. But prayer, that's how we do prayer. Prayer becomes the chief vehicle for our work on Yom Kippur. So this, even though we're all used to this, we're still not as good at this as many would like to be. And it's still hard for people to sit in prayer all that time. It's hard to stay focused. It's hard to stay in the moment of the special moment of Yom Kippur, in the zone of Yom Kippur for most of us. And that's, even though we've done it a lot and we do prayer a lot, but even though we do prayer a lot, we are surprisingly, at least on the surface, we're not that great at it. I think a lot of us would just say that about ourselves, that if the goal of prayer was that you were engaged with the ideas and the words, and you were sort of living it in the moment, living what you were saying, if that's the goal in prayer, there's very few people that actually end up doing that, because our minds begin to wander after a few seconds, and we're often daydreaming and stuff. And when you're daydreaming, you're being taken out of the experience to some degree. And so if that is really what was expected, if what was expected from us is that we would remain engaged and mindful of what we're saying and the experience we're meant to be having, if that's the goal, I think that it would be 1 in 10,000 who would say that they were able to accomplish the goal to the nth degree.
They might for a
Fully.
few minutes here,
Right.
and a few minutes there.
Right.
But not,
Right. So, and this is true with prayer in general, but I'm saying, but Yom Kippur is like, that's what we do on Yom Kippur. That's the entire focus is prayer. That's what we do. So it really looms large, this challenge about how to have a meaning for Yom Kippur. Now, Aryeh Kaplan, I don't remember where this was. I once read an article. It might have been in a Jewish Observer, like in a magazine article. I don't remember where I saw this, but he once suggested that even if your mind is wandering when you're praying, when you're davening, that doesn't mean that that there's not a part of you that is not connected to what's going on. So, and he compares it to a mantra, like when you, because a mantra is like a phrase or a line that you repeat over and over and over, and you repeat it. That now in Hinduism they call it a mantra. In rabbinic language they call it hitbonanut, where you're focusing on something. And this was a Musar practice from the 1800s. I don't know if it comes from ancient things. I don't know where it originated as a Jewish thing, but it is a Jewish thing, even amongst sort of traditional rabbinic sources. Starting in the 1800s, Rabbi Yisrael Salanter and the Musar movement, they used this methodology, was just to take a phrase from, it could be Shivisi Hashem lenegdi tamid. I place God before me always, something like that. You just say it over and over and over and over and over. You just keep on saying it, or you sing it, and you just sing it over and over and over and over. Now, once you've been doing it for a while, your mind just goes to other things, but you're still singing it. And even though your mind has been wandering to other things, there's something that is happening deep, and you feel it. There's a couple times where I was driving by myself, like one time was to New York, one time was from Minnesota to Chicago, where I was in the car by myself, and I was saying Shivisi Hashem lenegdi tamid over and over and over. I was picturing the four-letter name of God very large in front of my window. And so on the way to New York, it was a couple hours. On the way from Minnesota to Chicago, it was like an hour and a half. But when you've done it for a while, it gets deeper and deeper and deeper. And again, it doesn't matter that your mind wasn't on this
right.
entirely, because some part of you apparently is
Mhm.
So Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan of blessed memory suggested that it could be that is happening, because when we say the prayers over and over and over again, they become like a mantra, especially the Amida. Every day, 6 days a week, it's the same 19 blessings, and you do it 3 times a day, 6 days a week, and then on Shabbos you have 6 of those blessings 3 times. So you're doing it over and over, and he was suggesting that has this impact. So even if you don't think you're doing a good job, that it's possible, even though you don't think you did a good job, because your mind was wandering everywhere, and you didn't even feel like it was that spiritual, during different parts of it. It's still very likely that it's having
And
a
in fact,
deep impact. As long as you engage it, it's not a waste, even if your mind has been somewhere else the whole time. Rabbi Yosef Dov Soloveitchik from Boston and New York, of blessed memory. So he was once talking about kavana, when we speak of kavana, which is intent or like mindfulness. So the rule is that when you do a mitzvah, you're supposed to have a certain degree of mindful. You're supposed to know that you're doing a mitzvah. Let's say you're supposed to know you're doing a mitzvah, and to take it up a notch, you're supposed to know why. Maybe what the mitzvah is for, why you have the mitzvah. So let's say you're sitting in a sukkah. So when you're sitting in the sukkah, you're supposed to know that you're doing a mitzvah. You're not just sitting somewhere. What if you didn't know it was a sukkah? You weren't paying attention and you just needed shade. You just needed shade. So you went and sat in that place for shade. And then you left and somebody said to you, were you in a sukkah today? And you go, no, I haven't been in a sukkah all day. And then they say, weren't you sitting back there at that thing? And he goes, yeah, it was hot. I was getting out of the shade. That's a sukkah. And you're going, really? It did not look like a sukkah. I had no idea I was in a sukkah. So it could be in something like that where you're just sitting there, you didn't fulfill the mitzvah. Because when you're doing, again, even there it could be to some degree you did, but let's assume you did not, because a mitzvah requires kavanah. It requires intent, right? So the question is, when you say it requires intent, what do you mean by that? So usually we think that what we mean is that our conscious awareness is focused on that and that alone. That's usually what we imagine that it means to have intent, to have kavanah. That it has to be on that thing. My granddaughter, Tiki, when she was little, she said to me, remember this in the front of your mind. And that's what I think about. Like you're thinking about it in the front of your mind. Now, so
The front is for right now.
right. And you're paying like full, like conscious attention to it, and you're paying attention to it. But he suggested there are other kinds of awareness that also have to be taken into consideration. And the one example that he uses is a mother who's at home. Let's say you have he uses this exact thing. I don't remember exactly what his scenario is, but let's say you have a woman who's staying home because her kids are home. She happens to be working while she's at home. Let's say she's an attorney. So she's looking over contracts. That's what she's doing. She's looking over contracts. And when she's looking over contracts, she has to be paying attention. She has to be paying attention to these, because that's why you get an attorney to do this. They're paying attention. So she is paying attention. The front of her mind is on those contracts. But let's say there's been a couple minutes and
Too quiet.
it's been too quiet. So then suddenly she'll go, why is it so quiet? What's going on with the kids? And then she'll get up and she'll go into the other room and check on them and then figure out they're okay. And then she goes back in. So what was happening there? What was happening? It seems like that there's a part of her brain that is devoted to that. At the same time, a part of her brain is devoted to this. This would be a kind of you call it multitasking. Now, it could be women are more suitable to this than men are. Ramosha Shapiro once suggested that men are not good at this and women are much better at it. But even so, that's stereotypical, and there would be extremes. But you would imagine that both men and women have the ability to do this, and this would be another model for the fact that, let's say it is on Yom Kippur and my mind is wandering, or I got involved in something else, or I'm feeling depressed, or this is going on, or that's going on. And then I say to myself, when Yom Kippur's over, I just wasted that whole opportunity. It was a massive opportunity and I wasted it. But it's very possible that you didn't waste it, because there's other parts of you that are engaging with this that you're not aware of at the front of your mind. This also can be true when we're we're engaged with something that is meant to impact us. Like, let's say I don't know very much about art, about painting, but I'm in a gallery and I move from one special painting to another special painting to another one. And I don't know much about it, but I might say that with one or two of them, that I don't know but I love, there's something about that paint, like,
Yeah.
because it's interacting with you on a nonverbal level. It's interacting with you in a place where there aren't words, but it's still interacting with you. Even seeing other people around you that are into it. Hopefully there is a person or two into it near you. But even seeing other people around you that are into it, that can have an impact. The atmosphere itself can be impacting me on levels that I can't naturally translate into words, but I'm being impacted for it. Right. So I say all this because it is a daunting task, and there are many of us who have been given pep talks since we were little in preparation for Yom Kippur. And things were said, such as, you need to be paying attention to it. You need to be prepared for it. You can't just show up and expect it to work. And you need to have done work beforehand. And you need to be sincere when you say these things. And you need to be paying attention to it. And some of this stuff is like earth-shattering stuff. And you even feel guilty. Like some of that stuff, like who will live, like from the repetition of the Musaf of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, that kind of stuff, which is like so dramatic, and you're not feeling it. Like there could be judgment, you could be feeling some self-judgment about, so that not only, because there's a lot of people when it comes to Yom Kippur, they say to themselves, I'm going to mean it right now, but then in like a week, I'm going to go back to what I did. That's what people feel guilty about.
Yeah.
But there's a whole nother area of guilt where people are, especially like I'm saying, if you've been given these pep talks, where you feel guilty all throughout Yom Kippur because you weren't taking it as seriously as you're expected to take it, and you're not paying attention, and you're not feeling it. And so even during Yom Kippur, you're feeling it. So I'm saying all this because I am suggesting that you don't do that for Yom Kippur, that you don't beat up on yourself about what you were paying attention to and what you weren't paying attention to, and whether you're doing what you think is making the most of this time, and instead just enter Yom Kippur and try to, whenever you can, make the most of the moment that you can. But on those moments where you're not, to just assume that other stuff's going on. The mantra thing's happening. The other areas of awareness are happening. The fact that I'm being impacted by the environment is happening. And even the day, we're told that the day itself has different energy. Now, we may not be sensitive enough to know that, or, maybe we feel a little something, but we don't understand the significance of what we're feeling. But even the day itself, even if you're not in shul and you're not even saying all the words, you're just, let's say, at home on your own and you didn't even look at it, even the day itself could be working on you on areas of your person that is even below your awareness level. They have subliminal, they used to, I don't know if this exists anymore because it was supposed to be unlawful, but they used to have subliminal advertising.
Yeah, heard about that.
So one example of that was that you'd go to a movie and you have no idea this is going on, but every like certain amount of, what do they call them? Cells? I think they call them cells. The cell, like when they used to do movies on tape, and they'd have the machine, so it's
Frame?
a frame. That's it, a frame. So let's say you're watching, let's say 20 seconds of an animated Mickey Mouse cartoon. There could have been like 300 frames, 300 different frames, so that maybe 1,000 different frames for you to watch 10 minutes. That's how many frames are going by. And they go by so fast that you do not notice an individual frame. You don't notice an individual frame. So what they did was they would have popcorn. Yeah, like popcorn, Coke, candy, and it was happening so fast that you were not consciously aware that you saw it. But they demonstrated that you are impacted by it. You were absorbed by it. This could be another model that a person could use for this. In other words, you're not the best judge of what happened to you on Yom Kippur. You're not the best judge of, was it meaningful, what you absorbed, what changed or what didn't change. You're not always the best judge. You don't even always know what was going on at that time. Somebody might say one of the ways you could tell is if there's any difference after Yom Kippur compared to what was going on before. Are you acting differently? Are you thinking differently? Are you making different choices? That might be one way, but even that is not necessarily an objective way to measure whether it was impactful. So that's why I'm suggesting let go of it. Let go of it. You obviously, if you're able to, and you're, so then you would pay attention to what's going on and try to live the experience that you're describing in your prayers, that you'd want to do that. But if you can't, and you're not feeling it, or your mind's wandering, or whatever it is, then let go of it. Just let go of it and but just do this. Don't push Yom Kippur away. Just don't push Yom Kippur away. Now, let it just be what it is, but don't push it away. Just and if you do that, my experience has suggested to me, and things like that article from Ari Kaplan and that thing from Rabbi Soloveitchik, etc., suggest that there are other things going on, and you can let go of that other thing. You could let go of that other thing. I remember there were quite a few years where I thought that, I've been in places where many thousands of people are praying together. So like at the Kotel, there's during Sukkot and during Pesach Chol Hamoed, they have something called Birkas Kohanim, where the Kohanim bless everybody that's there as part of the prayers. And you could have the whole place full. You could have 100,000 people there. And you're having Birkas Kohanim. Everybody's focused on the same thing that's going on. And I was at the Kotel for Birkas Hachama. It was called Birkas Hachama, which happens once every 28 years. There's a blessing that everybody's, that you say together with the other people around you when you first see the sun on that day. So I was at the Kotel also. It was completely packed, probably 100,000 people there. And when I say Kotel, I mean the whole courtyard, everything, going all the way back. And there again, you're saying one blessing, everybody together, 100,000 people. So when it's just one blessing, you are paying attention. Yes. Or if it's Birkas Kohanim, you're paying attention, most likely. But I was also at a Siyum Hashas when at one of the completions of the Talmud in MetLife Stadium. This is like 13 years ago. And there was, it was either Mincha or Ma'ariv, I don't remember at one point, but there was an entire service that was prayed together by everybody there. There was 90,000 people there, and we were all davening together. So there, where you have a longer davening, that's where your mind's going to start wandering, okay? So let's say you have the 90,000. I'm just saying this to help with what we're talking about. This is not an indictment on anybody. This is just reality. The reality is, unless somebody has trained themselves to stay focused on something and their mind doesn't wander, unless somebody's trained themselves to do that, you're not going to do it. And when you're not going to do it, it happens very quickly. It happens in a matter of a few seconds that your mind wanders. I know this from myself, because even though I know about this, it happens to me. And it'll happen within seconds. Maybe you could last 8 seconds or 10 seconds, but then at some point your mind's off. So now let's say I'm in that place with 90,000 people. It's possible that out of those 90,000, that almost everyone there is not paying attention to the prayers after the first few seconds. Almost everyone out of the 90,000.
Checking each other out.
No, you're not even, yeah, whatever. You're just like, and you're thinking how cool this is and whatever. And then 2 seconds later, your mind's going on to another thing, on another thing, on another thing. So that was troubling to me, and I've been in yeshiva, where for years I would daven with hundreds of people together. And I was thinking to myself, it's unlikely that after a few seconds, anybody in the room is paying attention to the prayer. So why does it feel so powerful? That's the thing. Now, feelings are not an objective measure of something, but you can feel it. Like, I mean, when you're in those situations, it's just so deep. And when I was in yeshiva davening, it was always deep. When you were davening in yeshiva, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, it was the deepest of the deep, to the point where when I was married, I moved to a neighborhood where everybody was like a yeshiva guy, right? But now, right. So they were all trained for that. Everybody I was davening with, all the men, all the women, they went to seminary, the men everybody was trained, highly trained in prayer. It still was not, it did not compare to what it felt like in yeshiva. The intensity. The first year, I actually went back to my yeshiva. The first year I was married, my wife gave me permission to go back to the yeshiva for Yom Kippur. I did it that year, and I think I did it I seem to remember I did it for like 2 or 3 years afterwards, because it was just, it wasn't comparable. Now, if the average person had been to the place where I regularly davened, they would think that's very intense. So now, how could it be that intense? How could it be that intense if people are not paying attention to the words, if your mind's wandering? So that's why I know there's deep stuff. There's very, very deep stuff happening, whether you think you're paying attention or you're not.
Just the day itself.
Right. The day itself has energy. It's like Shabbos does for us, and Pesach does for us reliably, and Yom Kippur is available to do it. All I'm suggesting is, and always, don't let the guilt drag you down. Don't let anything, you just make the best effort you can, and then let go of everything else. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. If your mind wandered for 2 hours, doesn't matter. You're not, because it is not useful to feel guilty during Yom Kippur while it's going on. It drags you down and it takes you way out of the experience if that's what's going on. So you got to just let it go and trust the fact that this other stuff's going on, subliminal, subtextual, mantra-esque kind of things. All these kinds of things are happening and profoundly impacting us, and that we've gone through something very deep and important and successfully up to a certain degree. Obviously, you'd always want to do more, do it better, right? As it goes down, you always want to grow with it, but
Right.
you still had a successful Yom Kippur. When I was in yeshiva for many years, we were prepared for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur to believe that we do not deserve to be put in the book of life. That it's very unlikely that we're for sure not tzaddikim. And it's unlikely that we will end up in the book of life. That's how you were like working on yourself. You're working on yourself. I did so many things wrong. I am such an embarrassment to God. Because you're saying that in the liturgy. You're saying it over and over in the liturgy. So you're just like, and if you've been preparing from the beginning of Elul, you're really deep into that mindset.
Yeah.
And so I remember one time at the end of Yom Kippur, I happened to be using a machzor, and in the machzor it says, "And now the gates are closed. Go forth joyously with confidence that everything's been forgiven, and embrace Sukkot." That's what it says. And I'm going, what? Like, are you kidding me? There's no way. Like, how do you shift from thinking that you're the dregs of spiritual society to thinking that you got forgiven, etc.?
And everything's cool and go on to the next.
But it's way more important to go forward with that than to sit anchored down by feelings of guilt and inadequacy. So you go to Yom Kippur, you try to be in a situation where the people around you, as much as you can, where there's people around you who are, buying into what's happening, and you try to do your best, but at the same time, you are relying on the fact that all this other stuff's happening, and it really is true. When Yom Kippur is over, you have every right to trust that you have been forgiven for whatever, and now you're going to be able to move forward light without the burden of what happened before, and open and ready to embrace the next stage, which is going to be Sukkot that comes.
Nice.
All right.
Rabbi, I'll bet
Yeah.
When you're doing the vidui, however, I bet most people are paying attention.
I doubt it.
No?
I doubt
Really?
it. Well,
Really?
I'm not, I don't want to sound like again, if what we mean is that you're focusing on everyone, I'm not saying there wasn't one time you did that, but it's not likely that every time you did it. And like, even because think of how much time it takes. Ashamnu, Bogadnu, Gozalnu, Dibarnu, Dofi, Havinu, that's already 10 seconds. When have you ever thought about one thing for 10 seconds? It's not a common experience. If you're reading, you do. If you're watching a movie, you do. If you're listening to a lecture or a performance, you are. But when you're just sitting somewhere with a text in front of you, like a thing, it's very likely that at some point your mind's just going to go off. There are ways to do something. You point,
even if
use
you're
your
pounding
finger.
your chest during it.
Well, yeah, pounding your chest. One thing that people do is they follow their finger. That is a useful way. Breathing helps. Like if you do breathing and you allow yourself to meditate a bit, that helps tremendously on doing these things. There are techniques to helping overcome this thing. I'm just saying, even if you didn't, tremendous stuff happened. Even if you didn't, and stuff. And the reason I didn't want to talk so much about the techniques for doing it is because that adds to the burden if somebody didn't do it. And I'm trying to get away from that burden.
Yeah.
Okay.
Rabbi, it just occurred to me while you were talking about a woman being better at being able to have these two things going on, because at a time in her life when she's having children, there is another universe going on inside of her. I was thinking about
all the while.
Rivka.
That's interesting.
Yes, right.
That's interesting.
I mean, she has, I think of Rivka going and saying, what's going on inside of her?
In fact, there are Rabbi Aaron Feldman, Ramosha Shapiro said this also, but Rav Aaron Feldman writes this in one of his books, The River, the Kettle, and the Bird, or one of his books, maybe The Juggler and King, I don't know which one. It's probably River, Kettle, and the Bird, where he says that is what it means when it says Noshim Daiton Kalos. It's usually interpreted pejoratively, that women can't focus, or they can't maintain an intellectual process, but that's not what it means. What it means is their da'at is light. It can go from one thing to another. Whereas, and Ramon Shapiro once said, he said, if Avram Avinu would live in our time, he would be in an insane asylum.
Yeah.
Because things change so much. They're just constantly changing. And, this is a modern phenomena. It didn't used to be this way. And he said, even my grandma, I think he said his grandmother was born on the same bed in the same house as 13 generations. That things did not change as much. And so he was saying, men, that, if things are not changing and you're able to stay on something for a long time, you can accomplish a lot. And therefore, there's a certain aspect of men's makeup that makes them able to take advantage of that, but not when things are moving from one thing to another every 2 seconds.
They always attribute the fact that men are better bridge players to the fact that women are paying attention to what's going on in the room around them, and men,
Seriously?
nothing.
And
Nothing. Just the cards.
Rumors that there was a famous bridge game. They had a nude woman parading around the table with Terrence Reese, the greatest player. You noticed that story?
No, I'm kidding. All
Yeah.
right.
All right, guys.
See you in.
Have a meaningful Yom Kippur.
Yes.
Baruch Hasima Tova.
Okay.
It's wonderful to spend this time with you. Be well, my mole.
Love you, Pop.
Arona,
Tova.
have a meaningful Yom Kippur.
You too, Rabbi.
Bye-bye.
And Lois and David and Liz, we'll all gather again afterwards, relieved of the burden of our sins.
Yes.
He will help.
My sins are going.